Welcome to the Deep Dive, listeners. Ready to explore the fascinating world of animal biodiversity? I am. We've got a document here that goes from basic definitions to deep dives into specific animal groups. Should be a wild ride.
Oh, it's a huge topic for sure. The variety of life on Earth is just mind-blowing.
No doubt. So first things first, what do we even mean by biodiversity?
Well, at its simplest, it's the variety of life. When we're talking about animals, though, we're talking about millions of species, each with its own unique quirks and adaptations. Imagine a world without all that diversity. It would be pretty boring, right?
Can't argue with that. The document mentions this thing called taxonomy. Is that how scientists keep track of all these different species?
Exactly. Taxonomy is like a giant filing system for the animal kingdom. It groups animals based on shared traits to help understand how they're all related. And all that comes together in this thing called a phylogenetic tree.
Okay, so like a family tree, but for all the animals on Earth. I like it.
That's a great way to think about it. And understanding those relationships is key to understanding how animals have evolved and diversified over millions of years.
Got it. So taxonomy and the phylogenetic tree give us the big picture, but the document goes even deeper, right? It talks about body plans, which sounds pretty fundamental.
Oh yeah, body plans are like the blueprints for an animal structure. It's amazing how these plans have evolved to create such a crazy range of forms, from simple sponges all the way to us, the vertebrates.
Seriously. And the document focuses on 6 specific animal phyla. Can't wait to get into those. But before we do, what are some key elements of these body plans? I'm thinking about things like symmetry, for example. Why are some animals symmetrical and others seem totally random?
Great question. Symmetry is a fundamental part of animal design, and it's more complex than you might think. We tend to think of just bilateral symmetry, like us. You draw a line down the middle, you get 2 mirror images.
Right, left side and right side.
Exactly. But there are other types of symmetry, too. Take radial symmetry, for example. Think of a starfish. You can cut it through multiple planes and still get mirror images.
Ah, I see. Like slices of pie.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And then there are animals that are asymmetrical, no way to cut them into equal halves. Sponges are a classic example. Their shapes are totally irregular.
I never thought about sponges as being asymmetrical, but yeah, that makes sense. So we've got these different types of symmetry. What's the evolutionary benefit? Why are different animals shaped in these different ways?
Well, different types of symmetry are often linked to different lifestyles and roles. Bilateral symmetry, for example, is common in animals that move in one direction. Having a clear head and tail end makes for more efficient movement, and you can develop specialized sense organs up front.
Makes sense. So like a cheetah chasing a gazelle needs that streamlined bilateral symmetry for speed and agility. But what about radial symmetry? What's the advantage there?
That's often found in animals that stay put, attached to a surface, or those that float in the water, going with the flow. Imagine a sea anemone fixed to a rock. Its radial symmetry lets it catch food coming from any direction.
Oh, so like a 360-degree field of view. Very clever. Now, the document mentions another concept that's linked to symmetry cephalization. What is that and why is it important?
Cephalization basically means developing a head, concentrating your sense organs and nervous tissue at the front end. It's a big evolutionary innovation, especially for bilaterally symmetrical animals.
Yeah, I can see why having your brain and senses up front would give you an advantage in navigating your surroundings.
Absolutely. Allows for much more complex behavior, things like actively searching for food and mates and avoiding predators. Like a command center in your head, directing all your actions.
So not just about moving around, but about processing information and making decisions. Sounds like cephalization was a real game changer in animal evolution.
Oh yeah, definitely. It allowed animals to become much more active and engage with their surroundings. Now, to understand body plans more deeply, we also need to consider the building blocks of animal bodies' tissues.
Okay, going deeper. I vaguely remember learning about different types of tissues in bio class, but I'm a bit rusty on the details. Remind me, what are we talking about here?
Well, all animals, except the simplest ones, are made up of different tissues, which are groups of specialized cells that work together to do specific jobs. And these tissues develop from layers called germ layers, which form early on in development.
Okay, I remember that germ layers. What are the different types again?
The simplest animals, like sponges, have just 2 germ layers. An outer layer called the ectoderm and an inner layer called the endoderm. But most animals have a 3rd layer called the mesoderm, which sits between the ectoderm and endoderm.
So the mesoderm is like the middle child of germ layers.
You could say that, but it's a very important middle child. The mesoderm is where a bunch of tissues and organs come from, including muscles, bones, circulatory system, you name it.
Whoa, the mesoderm is the VIP of germ layers then. So animals with 3 germ layers are generally more complex than those with just 2.
Yeah, generally speaking, having that mesoderm allows for more complex body structures and organ systems. It's a major leap in complexity. And this brings us to another cool concept, the coelom.
Okay, now we're talking. What exactly is the coelom and why is it so important?
The coelom is a fluid-filled space that develops within the mesoderm. It's a defining feature of lots of animals, including us. Think of it like a space within the body that houses and protects your organs.
Okay, I can picture that. But what's so special about having this fluid-filled space? What's the advantage?
The coelom has a bunch of advantages. First, it allows for more flexibility and movement. The fluid acts as a hydrostatic skeleton, providing support and letting the muscles work more effectively.
So like a built-in shock absorber and support system.
Yeah, exactly. But it's more than that. The column also allows for the development of more complex, specialized organs. It gives them space to grow and develop without being squished by surrounding tissues. And in some animals, the column even acts as a simple circulatory system, moving nutrients and waste around.
Wow, so the column is like a multitasking marvel. Support, movement, protection, even helps with circulation. Incredible how such a simple thing can have such a huge impact on animal evolution.
It really shows the power of natural selection at work. Now, with this understanding of symmetry, germ layers, and the column, we're ready to tackle those 6 phyla highlighted in the document.
Bring it on. Let's start with the simplest animals on our list, the sponges. They may not seem like much, but I'm betting they have some hidden secrets to share.
Oh, absolutely. Sponges, which belong to phylum Porifera, are often overlooked. But they're fascinating creatures. They're the most ancient animal lineage, representing a very early stage in animal evolution.
Like living fossils then. Tell me more. What makes them so unique?
Well, for starters, sponges don't have true tissues or organs. They're basically collections of specialized cells working together. Imagine a colony of single-celled organisms deciding to team up and form a multicellular structure.
So a stepping stone between single-celled organisms and more complex animals.
Exactly. And their body plan is incredibly simple. It's essentially a network of channels and chambers with an opening at the top called the osculum.
And how do they eat? Do they have mouths?
Not in the traditional sense. They're filter feeders. They draw water in through tiny pores all over the body and trap food particles using these specialized cells called choanocytes, like they're constantly sifting through the water for their next meal.
So they're like living sieves. What about moving around? Can sponges move?
Most sponges are sessile, meaning they attach themselves to a surface and basically stay put for their whole lives. No muscles or nervous systems, so they can't really move the way we think of movement.
Find a good spot, settle in for the long haul. I never knew sponges were so unique. They represent a whole different way of life. And they play a crucial role in marine ecosystems, filtering water and providing a habitat for other creatures.
They're often called the unsung heroes of the ocean. Moving up the complexity ladder, we get to phylum Cnidaria, which includes jellyfish, corals, and sea anemones.
I've always been fascinated by jellyfish. They seem so alien and graceful. What can you tell me about them?
Jellyfish are truly remarkable. They've been around for over 500 million years, and they have some incredible adaptations for survival in a range of marine environments.
Okay, I'm all ears. What makes them so special?
Well, first of all, they have that radial symmetry we talked about. This body plan suits their lifestyle perfectly, drifting with the currents and catching prey from any direction.
Like having eyes all over your body. What about those stinging tentacles, though? I've heard some stories about jellyfish stings.
Those tentacles are armed with special cells called cnidocytes, which have these stinging structures called nematocysts. These nematocysts are incredibly fast and powerful. They fire tiny harpoons filled with venom to subdue prey.
Whoa, that's amazing. Mini weapon systems all over their body.
It's super effective for hunting in the open ocean. And one of the most fascinating things about cnidarians is they have 2 distinct body forms, the polyp and the medusa.
Okay, I'm not familiar with those terms. Break it down for me.
So the polyp is the stationary one, attached to a surface, like a sea anemone on a rock. It has a tube-shaped body with a mouth surrounded by tentacles.
So the polyp is like the home body of the Cnidarian world.
Exactly. The medusa, on the other hand, is the free-swimming form, the classic jellyfish we picture pulsing through the water. It has a bell-shaped body with tentacles trailing behind.
So the medusa is the adventural, out exploring the open ocean.
Precisely. And what's remarkable is that lots of cnidarians switch between these 2 forms during their life cycle.
Wait, So a jellyfish can start as a sessile polyp and then become a free-swimming medusa. That's incredible. It's like having two totally different lives. I'm even more fascinated by jellyfish now.
It's a brilliant adaptation that allows them to exploit different parts of the ecosystem at different points in their lives. Speaking of adaptations, let's move on to another cool phylum, Platyhelminthes, the flatworms.
Ah, those I remember from biology class. Aren't those the ones that are, well, flat? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, they're definitely flat. It's all about being adapted for their lifestyle.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me about these flat wonders. What's the advantage of being so, well, two-dimensional?
It's all about maximizing their surface area to volume ratio. Remember, we talked about that earlier. It's about how easily an organism can exchange materials with its environment. And for flatworms, that means maximizing absorption.
Right, so getting as much contact with their surroundings as possible. Why is absorption so important for flatworms, though?
Well, a lot of them are parasites, which means they live inside other organisms, absorbing nutrients from their host's body. That flat shape lets them spread out and maximize their contact with the host's tissues, absorbing nutrients really efficiently.
So like a bigger feeding surface. Pretty clever, even if it's a little creepy. But not all flatworms are parasites, are they?
That's right. They're also free-living flatworms that scavenge for food in their environment. Even for them, being flat is an advantage. It lets them slide into tight spaces, exploring all the little nooks and crannies where other organisms can't get to.
Like a biological pancake, slipping into all the hidden spots. Never thought of it that way. The document also mentions that flatworms are the first animals we've talked about that have bilateral symmetry and cephalization. Why is that significant?
That's a key step in evolution. Remember, bilateral symmetry is often linked to directional movement, and cephalization is developing a head with all your sensory organs concentrated there.
Right, like a command center at the front guiding all your actions. So flatworms are more mobile and more aware of their surroundings than sponges or jellyfish.
Absolutely. They can actively seek out food, find mates, and avoid danger. They're not just drifting around or stuck in one place. Opens up a whole world of possibilities when it comes to behavior and interacting with their environment.
So they've really upped their game in terms of complexity. Okay, on to the next phylum on our list. I'm pretty curious about this one, phylum Annelida, the segmented worms. Earthworms are a classic example, right?
Right, you are. Earthworms are probably the most familiar annelids, but there's a whole world of diversity in this phylum, including marine worms, even leeches.
Leeches, those are some creepy crawlies. But let's stick with earthworms for now. I've always wondered how they manage to burrow through the soil. What's their secret?
Their secret is in their segmented bodies. Imagine their body like a series of compartments, all linked together, each with its own set of muscles.
So like a living train with all those compartments.
That's a great analogy. This segmentation gives them incredible flexibility and allows for super coordinated movement. Each segment can expand or contract on its own, letting the worm push through the soil, inching along.
Ah, so they use the segments to grip and push, creating that wave-like motion that moves them through the soil.
Exactly. And to make that movement even more efficient, they use their coelom, that fluid-filled body cavity.
Right. The coelom acts like a hydrostatic skeleton, providing support and making the muscles work better.
You got it. In earthworms, the coelom is divided into segments, meaning each one can control its own pressure, like a series of tiny balloons inflating and deflating, letting the worm fine-tune its movements.
That's amazing. So it's not just muscles and segments, but also this internal pressure system. Earthworms are way more sophisticated than I thought.
They definitely are. And all that burrowing is really important for soil health. They aerate the soil, letting air and water in, and they mix organic matter into the soil, making it more fertile.
So not just creepy crawlies, but essential ecosystem engineers. I'm starting to see earthworms in a whole new light. Okay, ready for the next phylum? This one sounds like a big one. Phylum Arthropoda.
This is where things get really diverse. Arthropoda is the largest, most diverse phylum in the animal kingdom. It's got everything: insects, spiders, crustaceans, centipedes, you name it.
Wow, that is a huge group. What are some of the key characteristics that tie all these different creatures together?
The main things that make arthropods unique are their jointed appendages, their segmented bodies, and their hard exoskeletons.
Okay, break that down for me. What's so special about jointed appendages?
Jointed appendages, like legs, antennae, and mouth parts, are all about flexibility. They let arthropods move in all sorts of amazing ways. Think about how a spider's legs move or how strong a crab's claw is.
I see. Those joints give them such precise and specialized movements. What about the segmented bodies? Is that similar to what we saw with the earthworms?
The segmentation in arthropods is a little different. It's more specialized, with different segments often fusing together to create distinct body regions, like the head, thorax, and abdomen in insects.
So their segments are more like specialized modules, each with a specific job.
Exactly. That modular design allows for a lot of evolutionary flexibility, leading to the incredible diversity we see in arthropods.
Makes sense. Now, what about that hard exoskeleton you mentioned? What's it made of, and what's its purpose?
The exoskeleton is a tough, protective outer covering made mostly of chitin, which is a complex carbohydrate. It's basically a suit of armor, giving them support and protection.
So it's like built-in armor.
Exactly. It helps them defend against predators and injuries and provides structural support, allowing them to move around and interact with their environment.
That's pretty cool, but I'm guessing there's a downside to having a hard exoskeleton. Doesn't it make it hard to grow?
You're right. Because the exoskeleton is rigid, arthropods have to molt or shed their exoskeleton to grow. And during that molting process, they're soft and vulnerable, so it's a risky but necessary process.
So a trade-off protection and support, but they're vulnerable every now and then. Fascinating. Okay, before we move on to the final phylum, are there any fun facts or surprises about arthropods that you can share? This is such a big, diverse group. There must be some cool stories in there.
Oh, tons. Did you know that there are more species of insects than all other animal species combined? Or that some ants can lift 50 times their body weight? Or that spiders use silk for more than just webs? They use it to wrap prey, build shelters, and even to travel through the air.
Wait, travel through the air? Spiders can fly?
Well, not exactly fly. They release strands of silk that catch the wind and carry them like tiny kites, is how they spread to new habitats.
That's incredible. Okay, I'm ready for the grand finale. Phylum Chordata, the phylum that includes us humans.
Yes, Chordata. This is the group that includes all the vertebrates animals with backbones, as well as some invertebrates.
So fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, all chordates. What makes them so special?
All chordates have a few key features at some point in their development. A notochord, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, pharyngeal slits, and a postanal tail.
Okay, some of those sound familiar. What's a notochord?
The notochord is a flexible rod that runs along the back, providing support. In most vertebrates, it's eventually replaced by the vertebral column, the backbone.
Ah, that's where the term vertebrate comes from. And what about the dorsal hollow nerve cord? Is that like the spinal cord?
Exactly. It develops into the brain and spinal cord, the central nervous system of vertebrates.
So that's where our smarts come from. Now, what about these pharyngeal slits? I'm not sure I've ever heard of those.
Pharyngeal slits are openings in the pharynx, the area just behind the mouth. In aquatic chordates, like fish, they develop into gills, which are used for breathing.
Okay, that makes sense for fish. But what about us land animals? We don't have gills.
You're right. In land vertebrates, the pharyngeal slits are there in the embryo, but they close up during development. They're a leftover from our evolutionary history, a reminder of our aquatic ancestors.
Wow, that's fascinating. We're carrying a piece of our evolutionary past inside us. And what about the postanal tail? Is that why some animals have tails?
You got it. The postanal tail is just that, a tail that extends past the anus. It's present in many chordates, though it can be reduced or even absent in some, often used for balance, locomotion, even communication. Think of a dog wagging its tail or a monkey using its tail for balance when it climbs.
So that tail's got a lot of uses. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from the simplest sponges to the complex vertebrates we are. What stands out to you as the most amazing takeaway from our journey through these 6 phyla?
What really strikes me is just the incredible diversity of forms and adaptations that have evolved within each phylum. From sponges filtering food to jellyfish with their stinging cells, flatworms slithering around, earthworms burrowing through the soil, arthropods in their suits of armor, and us brainy vertebrates. It shows the power of natural selection to shape life in so many different ways.
Totally agree. It's like this giant evolutionary experiment, each phylum trying out a different strategy for survival. And it's all connected, each group playing a part in the bigger picture of life. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more concept I want to touch on. Surface area to volume ratio. We've mentioned it a few times, but I think it deserves a little more attention, especially when we think about animal size.
You're right. It's a key concept for understanding the limits and possibilities of animal form and function.
So remind me again, why is surface area to volume ratio so important?
It's all about how efficiently an animal can exchange materials with its environment. Think of it this way. As something gets bigger, its volume increases much faster than its surface area.
Okay, like with the flatworms, their shape maximizes their surface area for absorbing nutrients. But How does this play out when we're talking about animal size in general?
Same principle applies. Smaller animals have a higher surface area to volume ratio, meaning they can exchange gases, take in nutrients, and get rid of waste more easily.
So, like, a tiny ant can breathe through its skin, but a huge elephant needs big lungs.
Exactly. As animals get bigger, they need special systems to deal with that lower surface area to volume ratio. Think about the circulatory system, for example. Small animals can rely on simple diffusion to move nutrients and oxygen around, but larger animals need a complex network of blood vessels and a strong heart to pump blood effectively.
So surface area to volume ratio puts a sort of limit on how big an animal can get.
It's definitely a factor. There are physical and biological limits on size. Imagine a giant land animal, like, say, the size of a house. Its bones would have to be incredibly thick and strong to hold all that weight, and its heart would need to be massive to pump blood all the way to its feet.
I can see that. It would be a logistical nightmare for a giant animal to function. But what about aquatic animals? Whales are enormous, and they seem to manage just fine.
Good point. Water helps support the weight of large animals because of buoyancy. That's why the biggest animals on Earth, whales, live in the ocean. But even whales have limits. They have incredibly efficient respiratory and circulatory systems to handle their size, but there's a point where those systems just wouldn't be able to keep up.
So there's a kind of biological ceiling on how big an animal can get, even in the ocean.
That's right. It's a fascinating question. Scientists are still trying to figure out the boundaries of what's possible. It makes you wonder what amazing creatures might have existed in the past and what evolutionary innovations might shape the future of animal life.
It really does. It's like a huge puzzle, trying to figure out the limits of life itself.
Well, we've covered so much in this deep dive, from what biodiversity is to the nuts and bolts of body plans to the incredible diversity of the animal kingdom. I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for the amazing variety and complexity of life on Earth. Me too. It's important to remember, this is just a glimpse into the vast world of animal biodiversity. There's so much more to discover, and every species, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, plays a part in the intricate web of life.
Absolutely. This deep dive has definitely made me want to learn more about the amazing creatures that share our planet. Any last thoughts or advice for our listeners as they continue their own exploration of animal biodiversity?
I'd say never stop asking questions. Always look at the natural world with a sense of wonder and appreciate how everything is interconnected. We're all part of this grand evolutionary story, and understanding our place in it is crucial for our own well-being and for the health of our planet.
Well said. Thanks for taking us on this incredible journey through the world of animal biodiversity. It's been eye-opening and inspiring.
My pleasure.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.